I believe that the God who gave us life, gave us liberty, and that freedom is our birthright. I believe that the states created the federal government and not the other way around. And that the power that the states gave to the federal government, they can take back. When we were colonists, and the king and the parliament needed money from us, and they always seemed to need money, they devised ingenious ways to tax us. One of them was called the Stamp Act. The Parliament decreed that every piece of paper that the colonists had in their homes, every book, every document, every deed, every lease, every pamphlet, every poster to be nailed to a tree, had to have the king's stamp on it. You had to go to the post office is bad, you had to go to a British government office and buy a stamp with the king's picture. Question: how did the king know that his picture was on every piece of paper in your house? The Parliament enacted a hateful piece of legislation called the Writs of Assistance Act, which let the king's soldiers write their own search warrants and bang down any door they chose to look for the stamps or anything else that they were looking for. It was the last straw. We fought a revolution. We won the revolution. We wrote a constitution. The Constitution doesn't grant power, it keeps the government off our backs. When they were debating the Constitution in the summer of 1787 in Philadelphia, there were two great arguments, one by the Jefferson and Madison crowd, and one by the Adams and Hamilton crowd. Jefferson argued, though he wasn't physically there in Philly, Jefferson argued, as he did in the Declaration of Independence, that our rights are ours by virtue of our humanity, that as God is perfectly free and we are created in His image and likeness, we too are perfectly free. The big government crowd, yes, they had them even in those days, argued that you can't have freedom without government, and that government gives us our rights, and therefore government can take them away. This is not an academic argument. Jefferson and the natural law argument prevailed because the Constitution was written to keep the government from interfering with our natural rights. And so, your right to think as you wish, to say what you think, to publish what you say, to travel where you want, to worship as you see fit, to keep and bear arms to defend yourself against a tyranny. And after the right to life, the greatest and most uniquely American of rights, and I say this in front of the seat of the government, it is the right to be left alone. We wrote a Constitution to assure that the government would never interfere with these rights. Think about it. If rights come from the government, then the government, by ordinary legislation or presidential decree, can take them away. But if the rights come from our humanity, then unless we violate someone else's natural rights, the government cannot take our rights away. This is not just a Democrat, uppercase D, or a Republican, uppercase R problem. It is a problem with government today. There's a Republican version of big government just as assaultive to our liberties, and there's a Democrat version of big government. Look, we fought a revolution because the British soldiers could knock on our doors and demand that we house them and demand that we turn over property with them because they could write their own search warrants. In the Patriot Act, the most hateful piece of legislation since the Alien and Sedition Acts, a Republican Congress and a Republican president authorized federal agents to do the unthinkable, to write their own search warrants. And a Republican administration didn't even let members of the House of Representatives read the Patriot Act before they voted on it. Why should the government be able to spy on us? We should be able to spy on them! When some judge is rationalizing away our liberty, or some congressman is plotting to take your freedom or your tax dollars, we should know what they do every minute that they do it. I was speaking to a group of congressmen from a neighboring state. I won't tell you which state it was, but they don't play football there. That leaves just a few. And they came up to me and said, this is the first time we have heard that the Patriot Act allows federal agents to write their own search warrants. Remember, in the Constitution, we put in the Fourth Amendment, the right to be left alone, to make sure that if the government had a target, no matter how guilty the target, no matter how widespread is the belief in the guilt of the target, no matter how dangerous is the target, the government has to go through a neutral judge with a search warrant before it can get to that target. These members of Congress said, we didn't know that the Patriot Act allowed the government to bypass the courts and write any search warrant they wanted. And then I asked them a question that I knew the answer to already. Did you read the Patriot Act before you voted on it? Answer, no. What were you voting on? A summary we received. Let me guess who wrote the summary. Some lawyers in the Justice Department, right? Of course. Would you hire anybody to run your business that committed you to a violation of the very reason you were in business if they didn't even read the document by which they were making that commitment? Of course not. The camera is the new gun. There's nothing the government dislikes more than the light of day and cameras recording what the government is doing, whether it's on a street corner or in there or in Washington, D.C. We have the right to know everything that they do and why they do